plan is off to the Hungaroring this weekend for the latest edition of the Hungarian Grand Prix. It's a race that through the years has been the location of a few first-time winners, one of which coming in 2006 for Jenson, and here is how he got that first race win. Now, Button had originally qualified in 4th, between Raikkonen on pole, Massa and the Ferrari in 2nd, and Button's teammate Barrichello in 3rd. But due to a 10-place grid penalty for an engine change, that dropped into 14th on the grid. Starting just ahead of him was the championship leader Fernando Alonso, and a few places ahead was Alonso's main rival Michael Schumacher, both of whom had been penalised with 2 seconds added to their qualifying laps for incidents throughout the weekend, meaning they were lining up 11th and 15th on the grid. A grid that on race day was wet. Conditions that Button typically went rather well in. Seriously, throughout his F1 career, this man won 15 races, and I think almost half of them it rained during the race at some point. Jenson, Button, and wet weather, it just went together. It just did. When the race got underway, there was a few drivers that made really good starts, a couple of them being Schumacher and Alonso, with Schumacher getting up to 4th place. A brilliant start for the Ferrari driver, and I'm gonna be honest, it's about as good as it would get for him that afternoon. But Jenson Button also made a really good start. He got up to 11th at first on the opening lap, and come lap 3, he was making a move down the inside of DC for 8th place, the final points paying position in Formula 1 at that time. Like I said, Jenson goes rather well in rainy conditions. But on this day, so was Kimi Raikkonen. At this point, he was leading by around about 10-12 seconds or so. He was rapid at this time in Formula 1 anyway. But on lap number 6, then Jenson would find himself gaining a place from his teammate Barrichello pulling into the pit lane. And he'd also passed a couple more cars in this time. Felipe Massa and Giancarlo Fisichella for a couple. And then he also made a move on Michael Schumacher down the inside at turn 1 to get himself up into 4th place. Jenson was having a really good race so far. And as laps continued to take down, then he ended up being the fastest car on the track, and he pulled away massively from the Ferrari driver, who was struggling a bit on the Bridgestone tires. 4th place is where Button would continue to be for quite a while, as elsewhere on lap 13, then Felipe Massa entered the pits and went off the intermediates onto the full wet. Now, it was raining again, but Inters were still seeming like the tire to be on, because a lot of the Inter runners were quite comfortable. But lap 17 is when the main pit stop started happening for the front runners, as Pedro de la Rosa came into the pit lane for another set of inters. It was looking like it was originally going to be full wet, but no, they went for another set of inters, which put Button up to 3rd briefly. Well, for Michael Schumacher, his afternoon got even worse after he got damage on his front wing after Fizzy tagged it. The following lap, lap 18, race leader Kimi Raikkonen pulled into the pit lane, as did Jenson Button, and he came out in 5th place, with Alonso and Fisichella still to stop. And Fisichella would very quickly stop his entire race after he went off at turn 8, which put Button up to 4th place, with Alonso yet to make his pit stop still, of course. Once again, Button continued onwards in 4th place for quite a while, until we got to about lap 27, when Kimi Raikkonen was a little bit misguided in trying to get past a Toro Rosso he was trying to lap, and he ended up clipping said Toro Rosso of Antonio Liuzzi and crashed out of the race. Both of them, actually, which put Button up to 3rd and pulled the safety car out. Pedro de la Rosa pulled into the pit lane for the 2nd time that race, that very lap. And Alonso pulled into the pits, as did several drivers the following lap, but Button was not one of them. He stayed out. He'd already made a pit stop about 10 laps before, and this meant he was up to 2nd, and Alonso was just the driver ahead of him, as he'd been able to keep the race lead. At the start of lap 32 is when the safety car came in. So the gap to Alonso did grow out to about 9 seconds over the next couple of laps, until Alonso did end up slowing quite a bit for whatever reason, but he was still leading by quite a few seconds. For now though, because once again Button was absolutely flying. Come lap 37, the gap was just over 5 seconds, and give it another couple of laps and the gap was down to 3.5 seconds on lap 41. The same lap where Scott Speed decided to go onto the dry tires and promptly slid onto the grass. Over the next couple of laps, Button continued to close up to the Renault driver, his future McLaren teammate actually, and come lap 44, Button was less than a second behind Alonso. He was right behind him for the race lead. But of course, Button still had to make another pit stop, and he did. He pitted from air fuel at the start of lap 47, though he kept the SAM tires on and he managed to exit the pit lane still in P2. However, while he had stopped for fuel, he hadn't stopped for enough to get to the end of the race. And so that meant he would still have to pit again, but he was absolutely flying, thanks to being on slightly lower fuel, perhaps. And he was gradually closing the gap down to Alonso. He set the fastest first lap of the race, and drivers then started pitting for dry tyres at the start of lap 51. Alonso was one of them at the start of lap 52. He pitted onto dries, and Button stayed out to take the race lead once again, and he put the hammer down. He clearly wanted to try and go for the overcut to see if he could get past Alonso, or at least give himself a good tyre offset or something, but he didn't have to worry, because Alonso ended up going off after a drive shaft failure, bringing an end to his afternoon, and that meant Jenson Button was now had a 22-second lead or so. Another couple laps went by and Button pulled into the pits again for more fuel, and he finally went onto the dry tyres, and he ended up being able to keep the race lead. And I must say, I love James Allen's commentary at this part, basically just begging JB to keep it on the road and get that first win. Seriously, the full race is available to watch on F1 TV. Just go watch it, and from there, that was it. Button continued to pull away from P2, and at the end of the 70th lap, Jenson Button crossed the line to claim his first Formula 1 race victory by 30.8 seconds. P2 went with Pedro De La Rosa, with Nick Heidfeld taking the final step on the podium, just ahead of Rubens Barrichello in P4, who was the last driver to finish on the lead lap. In his 115th race, 113th start, Jenson Button was finally a race winner. What was at the time the third longest wait for a race win in F1 history. It's now the sixth longest wait. 18 years ago, the Hungarian Grand Prix saw a first-time winner. Might we see another first-time winner this weekend? Well, we'll have to see what Piastri can do and see if McLaren can manage to not bottle it this weekend. But I'll leave this one here. Let me get your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.